How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Zayin, Daf 17 of Masechta Makos. Friends, your friends. Today's arguably interesting Daf. Alright, so we're going to start on Daf Yud Zayin, Amud Aleph, at the Mishnah, about 5-6 lines into where it gets wide. It says the Mishnah, Ochel Bikurim Ad Sheloi. So somebody who eats bikurim before they've been read. What does that mean? Well, what are bikurim? Bikurim are the first fruits, right? You go out to your field, you find your first fruits, the Shiva Saminim, and you bring them to Yerushalayim. Now, once they come into Jerusalem, I believe that once they come into Yerushalayim, at that point, they already become like kadosh or whatever. They become like bikurim, and that means that, and bikurim is as we're going to see in the pasuk, it's called trumas yodecha. So it's basically a kind of truma. So for basically at that point, a zar who eats it is going to be chayiv like if he eats truma, and a kohen, kohanim eat bikurim. But Kohanim still cannot eat the bikurim until the bringer brings the bikurim to the Beis Hamikdash, and v'hinachto eitzel mizbeach, and then it says v'aniso v'amarta arami ovid avi. So that's two separate things. There's hanocha and there's kriya. There's putting down the bikurim by the mizbeach, and there's also reading some psukim. So there's a machloikes about is putting down the bikurim there by the mizbeach enough? Well, what does it mean enough? At that point, is the kohen allowed to eat it? Or does he have to wait until after Arami Ovid Avi, until after Kriya, until after the person bringing it says Arami Ovid Avi, the psukim of Arami Ovid Avi, and only at that point the kohen can eat it. So now says the Mishnah, okay, so ha'ochel bikurim actually korelem. So says the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is of the opinion that it's not enough to just put the bikurim by the mizbeach. You also have to read Arami Ovid Avi. So if anybody who eats bikurim prior to that point, whether you're the kohen, right, who eats the bikurim prior to kriya, or whether you're a zar who eats the bikurim and you're chayiv misi b'dei shamayim. And I think what it's saying is that if you are warned for Makos, you can get Makos. So, okay. So, ochel bikurim ad sheloi karalem. So, anybody who eats bikurim prior to kriya, prior to reading, prior to putting the bikurim by the mizbeach and reading the psukim of Arami Ovid Avi, kodshei kodshim chutz lekloim. Or anybody who eats kodshei kodshim, like a chatos and osham, outside, so a kohen be'etzim, who eats kodshei kodshim outside of the hazari, kodshim kalim u'maiser sheni chutz lachema, right? Kodshim kalim, for example, a korban shlomim, korban toda. We're going to learn more about these korbanos a little bit later. They're going to come up. Korban Pesach, I believe, right? There's it's Pesach right now. Anyway, so Kodshim Kalim u'Maiser Sheni, and of course Maiser Sheni Chutz L'choma outside of Jerusalem. Hashoiver es ha'etzem ba'Pesach. It's Pesach right now, when I'm recording at least. Somebody who breaks a bone in the Korban Pesach Ator, if the Korban Pesach is a pure, it didn't become possible. It's a pure, didn't become tummy. It's a pure Korban Pesach. So if you break a bone, right, you can't break bones. In any of these scenarios, you will get 40 makis. Avo hamosir bitar. But when it comes to noser, of course, we've learned about noser as being a lavanitik le'eseh, right? So if by noser, bashover bitame, or if you break the bones of a tame korban pesach, eno loker eser boim, does not incur 40 lashes. Hanotal eim alabonim. We learned about this. Was it yesterday? Yesterday, I believe we learned about this. That somebody who takes the mother bird from upon her children. Reb Yehuda Omer Lokevin Mishalech. Reb Yehuda says that this is a lav shekidmo essay, and that chayev makis. Chacham mishalech v'neloko is Chacham say it is a lav anitak essay that if you took the mother bird, so then you have to. So the Chacham say if you took the mother bird, you could just send her away, and that will problem solve. Zakah, this is the rule. Kol mitzvahs lo saseh sheish bakum esay. When you have mitzvahs lo saseh, but has a mitzvahs asay as a remedy, ein chayv aleh, you will not be chayv makis for that. So be'etzem lav nitak le'asay, you will not be chayv makis for. Azoy. Now, says the Gemara. We're going to have like a bunch. So this is going to be kind of interesting, in my opinion, until the end of the daf. There's going to be, I don't even know how to explain it, different kal v'chomers and things and things and stuff. So, okay, here we go. Says the Gemara. Says Rabbi Chana Rabbi Yechanan, Zo divrei Rabbi Akiva stimtoya. So says Rabbi Chana Rabbi Yochanan that our Mishnah is the view of Rabbi Akiva Stimta. Who's Rabbi Akiva Stimta? Rabbi Akiva. Why is he called Stimta? What does Rashi say? Rabbi Akiva she'ragil Rebbe listoim dvarav b'mishnah b'stam b'cham mekomas. That there are some places, of course we say generally Stam Mishnah is Rav Meir, but honestly the same place where we say Stam Mishnah is Rav Meir, we say V'chula aliba de Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi says Stam Mishnah is Rav Meir, Stam Tosefta is Rav Nechemya, Stam Sifrei is Rav Shimon, Stam Sifra is Rav Yehuda. We say V'chulu aliba de Rabbi Akiva because they're all students of Rabbi Akiva. But anyways, there are also Gemara calls Rabbi Akiva Stimta because there are places where Rabbi Yehuda Nasi sometimes had a Stam Mishnah, and it was the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. That Rabbi Akiva was anonymously, his opinion was anonymously, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi anonymously recorded the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. So this is one of those examples, that this Mishnah, which says that Kriya by Bikurim is Me'akev, that it's not enough to just put the Bikurim down by the Mizbeach, but rather you also have to do Kriya, you also have to read Arami Aviravi, only then can the Kohen eat it. So Zodiv Rabbi Akiva Stimtoya, this is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva Stimtoya, Avachachamim Omrim, Bikurim, Hanocha Me'akev Boin, Kriya Ein Me'akev Boin. However, the opinion of the sages is that when it comes to Bikurim, only Hanocha is Me'akev, Kriya is not Me'akevis. The Kohen can already, at least technically speaking, eat the Bikurim prior to Kriya, after Hanocha. I think there's a lot of noise going on outside. I wish there wasn't, but the noise cancelling headphones are very helpful. I'm just kind of curious to see what's going on though. Somebody's yelling. Yeah, I don't know, there's a lot of banging and yelling. I don't know why. I wonder why. Don't they know I'm recording Babylon Talmud? Okay. Where are we? V'lema zoi divrei Shimon stimtoya. Or now, Frek the Gemara. Wait, why are we saying that this is the Mishnah? That this Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva stimtoya? Let's say it's Rabbi Shimon stimtoya. Oh man. Excuse me. Hakamaj Malon to Rabbi Akiva Reb Shimon Svirle. Well, what Rabbi Yochanan is teaching us is that Rabbi Akiva and Reb Shimon are in cahoots. They agree. My Reb Shimon, no, what's this Reb Shimon Stimtoya? My Reb Shimon Tanya is one of the Brisa Usrumas Yodecho. Okay, listen up, friends. Now this pasuk, I'm going to read you the pasuk, okay? Lo suchal lecho b'sharecho, you can't eat outside of Yerushalayim in your gates. Meiser sheni of digoncha, siroshcha, vitzarecho. Okay, so meiser sheni betzim. Now, it then continues on the list. Uvechoros bekarcha, right, uvechoros, bechor, bechor behema. Bekarcha, vitzonecha, we're going to have to learn about that. V'chol nidarecha, asher tidar, v'nidvosecha, sumas yadecha. We're going to break that. Basically, this pasuk lists a lot of things. We are now going to go through these things one by one and explain things about these things. Okay? So now also interestingly, as we're going to learn more about at the end of today's daf, we are going to be expounding the verse backwards, starting at the end. So the last thing in the pasuk is usrumas yodecha. So now, so the Tanya sumas yadecha. When it comes to trumas, the words trumas yadecha in the pasuk, what's going on? Elu bikurim sumas yadecha is a reference to bikurim. Reb Shimon maba zeh l'lamdenu, and comes. So it says Reb Shimon, what is the pasuk teaching us about? Trumas yadecha, about bikurim. If it's to say that a kohen is forbidden from eating bikurim outside of Jerusalem, kal v'chomer mimaiser hakal. But I don't need the pasuk to teach me that bikurim must be eaten inside of Jerusalem. I can learn it out from a kal v'chomer. If right, uma maiser hakal ochlo chutz l'choma loke. If when it comes to maiser sheni, which is more lenient than bikurim, and if you're wondering what makes maiser sheni more lenient than bikurim, the Gemara is going to ask. We're going to have a lot of kal v'chomers now, and the Gemara is going to ask on Yud Zayin Amud Beis, on the second Amud of today's daf. The Gemara is going to question these kal v'chomers, but for now, let's just go with the flow and say, well, if maiser sheni is more lenient, and yet it has the restriction that it must be eaten inside of Jerusalem, well then bikurim, which is more stringent, of course it must be eaten in Jerusalem. So I know that already. So what is the pasuk teaching me by listing usrumas yodecha? So bikurim lo kol shekain, certainly bikurim should have to be eaten in Jerusalem. So ha loy ba akosiv ella, rather what the pasuk is coming to teach us is leochel mi bikurim ad sheloi kara alein shu loike. That says Reb Shimon, that what the pasuk is teaching is that that if the kohen, or I guess the Mishnah really said anybody who eats, the specific chiddush of hanocha versus kriya, I think would really be for the kohen, right? That's what allows him to eat it. I mean, technically anybody else who eats it also could get makos, but specifically. But even after that, I imagine that Yisrael would be able to get makos. But anyway, so let's just talk about the kohen maybe. That a kohen is allowed to eat bikurim once there has been hanocha and kriya. Prior to that, he would get makos. Again, elochami bikurim, that is coming to teach that a kohen who eats bikurim ad sheloi kara alein, prior to kriya, meaning hanocha and kriya, so then she'uloka. So then he'll get makos. So we see that Reb Shimon's opinion is that hanocha is not enough. You must also have kriya. Givaldi. Now the brisa, however, continues, right? She'uloka, that'll get makos if he eats the bikurim before then. Now the brisa continues. That was the important part that we needed to learn, right? That Reb Shimon's opinion is like Reb Akiva's opinion, that kriya is ma'akev. But now we continue the weiter, we continue the brisa just for fun. Vinid vosecha. So continuing backwards through the pasuk, when it says vinid vosecha, I don't know, your donations. Zo toda v'shlamim. That is a reference, so nidvosecha is a reference to korban toda and korban shlomim, kachim kalim. Reb Shimon maba zeh l'lamdenu. What is this coming to teach us? What halacha about toda and shlomim is it coming to teach us? If it's to teach us that shlomim and toda must be eaten in Jerusalem, well, that's a kal v'chomer from maiser Sheni. If Meiser Sheni needs to be in Jerusalem, so then certainly Shlomim and Toda must be in Jerusalem. Loba Akos of Ella, what the pasuk is coming to teach us about Toda and Shlomim is Le'ochel b'Toda b'Shlomim lifnei zrika she'u loke. It's coming to teach us the halacha that if one eats from a korban Toda or a korban Shlomim, before the blood has been thrown on the mizbeach, right? Of course, when a Toda or Shlomim, or I think any korban basically, is slaughtered, so there's the slaughtering, there's the Kabbalah Saddam, receiving the blood, bringing the blood to the mizbeach, and throwing the blood onto the mizbeach. If the meat of the Toda or the Shlomim is eaten before Zrikas Adam, Makos, Sheuloke. U'v'choris, moving backwards through the pasuk, B'choris Zeh Bechor. That's the firstborn animal that is given to the Kohen, and the Kohen eats it as a korban. Reb Shimon, says Reb Shimon, Ma bazeh lilamdenu. What is this coming to teach us? Im la'ochlon chutz l'choma. If it's coming to teach us that it must be in Jerusalem, if you eat it outside of Jerusalem, you'll get makis. Kavachomer mi meiser. We already know that from a kavachomer from meiser sheni. Im lifnei zrika, and if it's that if you eat it before zrikas adam, makis kavachomer mi toda v'shlomim. So we'll learn that from a kavachomer from toda and shlomim. Again, we're going to explain what makes this more bechor, more chomer than toda v'shlomim. But anyways, so what's it coming to teach? Alo ba akosav ella la'ochel min ha'bechor. Afilu la'achar zrika shu loke. What this is teaching us, what Bechor in the pasuk is teaching us, is that a zar, a non-kohen, who eats from the korban Bechor behema, even after zrikas adam, if you're a zar and you eat it, you will be chayev makis. Bekarcha vitzonecha. What do we learn out from those words, going backwards through the pasuk? Zo chatas v'oshim. Bekarcha v'tzonecha is a reference to korban chatas and a korban oshim. A korban chatas and korban oshim, koche koche. What's this coming to teach us? If it's to say that it must be in Jerusalem, kavachom mi meiser. We know that from a kavachomer from meiser sheni. Lifnei zrika, kavachom mitod v'shlom. If it's to teach that that anybody who eats from the meat, a kohen who eats from the meat of a chatas or an oshim before zrikas domim, well, that we already know from Toda v'Shlomim. Im lachar zrika, and if it's to say that a zar will be chayiv for eating these korbanos after zrikas adam, kavachom mi bechor, then that from kavachom from bechor. Haloba kosov elo. What the pasuk is teaching us by chatos and oshim is la'ochel mechatos v'oshim afilu la'achar zrika chutz l'kloim shuloke. That if a kohen eats from a chatos or an oshim after zrika, but he eats it outside of the azar, he's going to get makis. It has to be eaten in the azar. Nidarecho zo'ola. Finally, moving backwards through the pasuk, we get to nidarecho. We said that is a reference to a korban ola. A korban ola. What are we learning about the korban ola? If it's to teach us that you get makis for eating the korban ola outside of Jerusalem, now of course you're not supposed to eat the korban ola at all. But right, it goes only Rabbanu Shalom eats the korban ola. But if you eat it, if we say you get makis if you eat it outside of Jerusalem, so then you kavachomer from meiser sheni. Im lifnei zrika, if you're talking about eating it before zrika, kavachomer mitod v'shlomim. Im la'achar zrika, kavachomer mi bechor. Im chutz l'kloim, kavachomer mi chatos v'osham. Halei ba'akosu. Ella, what the pasuk is coming to teach us about Toda, about Ola, that we haven't learned from any of those other examples that we just listed. La'ochel min ha'ola la'achar zrika afilu bifnim shuloke. What it's teaching is that somebody eats an Ola from a Ola after, and he's a kohen and he eats it after zrikas adam, and it's in the azar. But still going to get makis because you're not allowed to eat the korban ola. Only the Rabbanu Shalom eats a korban ola. Okay, fine. So we had this brisa based on that pasuk that listed a whole bunch of stuff, and it was teaching us different halachas about all these different kinds of korbanos and different scenarios where you can get whipped when it comes to these korbanos. Or really like different kinds of like kodesh, right? Because not all korbanos, you also have bikurim, you also have meiser sheni in there, but we listed a whole bunch of stuff and different potential whipping. Azoy. Now, Omar Rove, now says Rove, Dilida ime kirib shimin tailid. If a baby is being born, and he's going to, and the baby that is going to be born is a baby as great as Reb Shimon ben Yochai, then the mother should move ahead with the birth. V'ilo lo seilid. If not, there's no point here. It's a kind of a funny phrase, but the point is, Rashbi is the best. And, everybody should want to be like Rashbi. And even though all these kavachomers that we just listed, right, they're all these kavachomers from Meiser Sheni, and you have, Bechor is more chomer than Shlamim Im Toda, and you have Chatas and Oshim is more chomer than Bechor. All is more chomer than Chatas and Shlamim, not Chatas and Oshim. All these different kavachomers. Says Rava that we have questions on all of them. Again, Amar Rava says Rava, Dilida you make Reb Shimon tailed v'lo seiled. First he starts by saying, look, it's only shaykh to be born if you can be as great as the Rashbi. But va'afal gab this lepircha, and even though he has questions on all of his kavach, even though there are questions on all of his kavachom, is my chumra the bikurim mimaiser. Initially, we said that we can learn a kavachomer for bikurim from meiser sheni. Bikurim is more chomer than meiser sheni. What makes bikurim more chomer than meiser sheni? Shekei asurim lezar. Well, because bikurim cannot be eaten by non-koins. It's like truma. It can only be eaten by koyanim, also to everybody else. But other meiser chomer, I'll say meiser sheni is more chomer than bikurim. Shekei also laonin. Meiser sheni, right? Lo achalti ba'oni mimenu. Meiser sheni cannot be eaten by an onen. Bikurim can. So in that sense, Meiser Sheni should be more chomer than Bikurim. And what makes a korban tod and a korban shlamim more chomer than Meiser? Shekein tunin ma'in domim ve'emurin legabim mizbeach. Is it because the blood and the emurin, the specified parts, go on the mizbeach? But Adav Meiser chomer, I'll argue that Meiser Sheni is more chomer than Shlamim and Toda. Shekein Toon Kesef Tzura, because when you redeem Meiser Sheni, you have to use a minted coin. That makes Meiser Sheni a chomer. Umay chumra the Bechor mi Toda v'Shlamim. What makes Bechor more chomer than Toda and Shlamim? Shekein Kedushaso Meirechem, because Bechor is already kadosh from the time that it's born, right? From even before it's born, right? It's the firstborn. It's already kadosh. Whereas Shlamim and Toda were designated later on in their lives. But Adar Toda v'Shlamim chamur. I'll argue that Toda and Shlamim are more chamer than Bechor. Shkentunim smicha v'nisachim v'tnufas chazav ashok, because by a Toda and Shlamim there's you lean on the animal, you libate the korban, you wave around the breast and the leg. Wow, that makes that pretty chomer. And what makes chatas and osham more chomer than bechor? She can kodshe kodshim, because chatas and osham are kodshe kodshim, whereas bechor is, I guess, kodshim kalim, right? What was that? Bechor v'amaisa v'pesach kodshim kalim. I think that's what we say in Ezu Mekomen. Adrabah, but I'll say faked. Bechor chomer shin kedushas merechem. I'll argue that Bechor is more chomer than Osham and Chatas, because it's kadosh already from the womb. My chomer the ola mechatas v'Osham, and what makes ola more chomer than Chatas and Osham? Shekein kalu, because it's entirely burnt for the Rebbeinu Shalom. None of it is eaten. But Adab, Chatas Vashim Chamiriel said that Chatas Noshim are Machamer than Ola, Shken Mechape, because Chatas Noshim can actually provide atonement. V'chulu Chamir Me'ola, and actually all of the Korbanos are Machamer than Ola, the Ispu Shtei Achidos, because by the others, Korbanos, there are 2 eatings for Hashem and also for others. So, we have all of these questions on all of these Kal V'chomers from Reb Shimon. So, Ella, my Dilida Ime, Reb Shimon. So if that's the case, that we have questions on all of Reb Shimon's Kal V'chomers, then why is Rava praising Reb Shimon so much that everybody should be born only if they're like Reb Shimon? So answer the Gemara, Dilamai Desvir le Ledide Misaris le Likra V'dorish le. Because Reb Shimon had the brilliant insight that this pasuk needs to be darshaned backwards. Because if you darshan the pasuk forwards, you get into trouble. Because, for example, if you look at this pasuk from, so, well, how about this? We started with Bikurim, right? We started with Bikurim to say that Meiser. We started Bikurim to say that Bikurim. We already know from what we say Bikurim is basically we can learn out from a Kal V'chomer from Meiser Sheni. So therefore, what do we learn out from Bikurim? Okay, so we said that has to be after Kriya. Fine. Then we moved on to Shlomim and Ola. And we said, what do we learn out from that? It's not that they have to be eaten in Shlomim and Toda. It's not that they have to be eaten in Jerusalem, because we already know that. It's that they can't be eaten before Zrikas Hadam. Once we got to that, we said, okay, what about Bechor? We say, well, it's not that it has to be eaten in Jerusalem, because we already know that. It's not that it has to be before Zrikas Hadam, we already know that. So what do we learn out from Bechor? That it cannot be eaten by a Zar, right? But imagine if we learned it from the other way around. Imagine we first got to the Bechor, and we had to say, well, what's Bechor teaching me? Well, it's not teaching me that I have to eat in Jerusalem. I know that from Ma'aser Sheni. Well, it must be teaching me that Bechor has to be eaten before Zrikas Hadam. But okay, if that's the case, if we're learning that from Bechor, then how would we know that Bechor can't be eaten by a non-Zar? Kilu, because we built it up backwards, that was precisely the order in order to learn all the unique halachis that built upon the previous halachis that we learned. But if we learned it the other way around, then we kind of learned out, let's say, that you need to, that you chayv makos if you eat the before Zrikas Hadam. If we learn that from Bechor, then we never would have been able to learn out that a Zar who eats a Bechor is chayiv makos. So because Reb Shimon had the insight to darshan that pasuk backwards, that even though the Kal V'chomers were shaky, but that insight enough was gold. Now, frek the Gemara. The Gemara asked an interesting question, which is, we were using Kal V'chomers all along, right? We said, Bikurim, I already know that you chayv makos if you eat it outside of Jerusalem as a Kal V'chomer from Ma'aser Sheni. But frek the Gemara, do we give azharas? Do we give warnings from Kal V'chomers? That based on a Kal V'chomer, we're going to say you're chayv makos? Hafilu man da Omer onshin minadin, in mazhirin minadin. Even if you say that when it comes to, for example, like we had like the chiyuv kares when it comes to achoso, right? So maybe you could say there onshin minadin, right? There was that whole question. Even if you say onshin minadin, right? There was an opinion for Yitzchak, who, I don't know, maybe he learned it off from a Kal V'chomer, whatever it is. Even if you say onshin minadin, as harin mazhir minadin, nobody says mazhir minadin. So I don't understand how, based on these Kal V'chomers, of that, well, if Ma'aser Sheni you chayv makos for outside of Jerusalem, well then certainly Bikurim. But I thought we don't punish. We don't warn, right? We don't have a lav based on a Kal V'chomer. So answer the Gemara, Isur Ba'alma. You know what? We're not actually going to give makos in these examples based on the Kal V'chomer. We're just going to say you're not allowed to do it. But if you do it, you won't be chayiv makos. But once again, Rava says, Zar, if you have a Zar, listen to this, count this up. A zar, a non-kohen. She'achol min ha'ola, who eats an ola. And nobody's allowed to eat an ola. So not only is nobody allowed to eat an ola, not even a kohen can eat an ola, but he's not even a kohen, he's a zar. Lifnei zrika, and it's before zrika sadam. Even if you could eat an ola, you would only be able to eat it after zrika sadam, but you ate it before zrika sadam. Chutz lechoma, you ate it outside of Jerusalem. Now an ola, right, isn't eaten at all. But now he not only ate it outside of the zar, he also ate it out of Jerusalem. So it's he did 5 things wrong. He's a zar. He's eating a korban ola before zrika sadam, outside of the zara, outside of Yerushalayim. So the Reb Shimon Loka Chomish, according to Reb Shimon, he's going to get makis 5 times for that. So we see that he is getting makis. Chamisha isurin havu. Okay, so say not 5 makis, but 5 isurs. But v'ha'anan tanan elu en alokin. But one second, these are examples that are in right. For example, bikurim was in a Mishnah that was saying that you get makis for bikurim. So don't come and tell me, right? We said somebody meiser shei, right? So koche kochim, chutz leklayim, kochim kalim, meiser shei chutz lechoma, right? Ocha bikurim, right? Lifnei kriya. These are all in the Mishnah saying that we get makis for them. So ela rather kra yisere hu. No, so rather the reason why we can give makis in these cases is because these psukim are extra. Is because these psukim are extra. Michle ksiv. Because the pasuk says a few psukim earlier, va'aveis Hashem, they will bring to Yerushalayim, v'achat Hashem, v'achat l'fnei Hashem l'kecha b'makom v'chum v'gomer. What does it say in that pasuk? I'm going to read the whole pasuk. So this was an earlier pasuk that says, va'aveisim Shama, you'll bring to Yerushalayim, olosechem, your olas, v'zivchechem, es masrosechem, ma'aser sheni v'es trumas yadchem, bikurim, v'nidrechem, v'nidvosechem, right, v'chorz b'korchem, v'tzonchem, right, we talk about b'chor, shlamim, toda, chatos, oshem. We already said that all of these things that we listed in our pasuk, a few pasukim later, we already mentioned them a few psukim earlier that they have to be in Yerushalayim. So being that we already mentioned all of these examples, so lichtov rachmana lo suchal leochlam. So you know what? In this pasuk, if we wanted to have a lav, and we wanted to say that you chayv makis for all of these things, we should just say lo suchal leochlam outside of Jerusalem, and then we would have a lav for right osam. Right? We literally just listed them. Instead of listing them all over again, just say, we literally just listed all of these things. If you eat, right, don't eat them out of Jerusalem. And then I'll realize, okay, all the things that we just listed, you'd be chayv makis for if you eat them out of Jerusalem. Why does the pasuk now go through each example all over again? Right? The pasuk says, right? Lo sucha lecha b'shorecha ma'aser degonecha v'sorshcha v'tzorecha v'chorz b'korcha v'tzonecha v'chonedrecha asher tidor v'nidvosecha sumasedecha. Why repeat all these things? So ela liyechude lehu lave l'chochad v'chad. The answer is to give these specific lavs for each and every one. Right? Bikurim, that it has to be before. You have to do kriya. Meiser and Shlom and Toda, that it has to be after Zrika Sadam. So before Zrika Sadam, you be chayiv makis. So like all of these additional lavin are from the fact that the Torah goes over each and every one of these things after it had already been listed a few psukim earlier. That was Daf Yud Zayin of Masechta Makos. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.